Welcome to my pocket guide. I will teach you how to dominate on one of the most fun characters in Deadlock. I'm currently the 12th highest ranked pocket with a 76% win ratio. And I don't come from any FPS background. I'm a StarCraft 2 pro gamer with Dota 2 experience that just started playing 2 weeks ago. This means that I don't have any insane mechanics in terms of movement nor aim compared to the other top players, so following this guide should be possible for anyone out there. Let's start off by explaining the strengths of Pocket. His kit is quite similar to a hero I play a lot in Dota called Puck. He is an evasive character that is good at going into the backline nuking players with spirit damage. He has strong movement options which allows him to get on top of opponents quickly and punish players that are out of position. His ultimate is also great for teamfighting, and he can act as a good counter-initiator when the opponents are overextending on a target and clump up. He generally is good at dueling players, can snowball quickly from a good early game, and has great potential for skill expression. Alright, I'll start off by explaining all of Pocket's abilities, as well as his gun, and then I'll go over his exact build, what to use, in which situation, which items to buy, and then I'll show you guys some laning examples, what to do in lane, and then I'll talk about a general game plan of mid and late game, what to do. Let's start off by talking about Pocket's gun. Pocket uses a shotgun with 7 pellets around the center of where your crosshair is. It makes it very easy to connect with opponents. It's obviously better since it's a shotgun for close range fighting, but it's also very good to proc a lot of passives. So for example, the headshot booster, you just need to connect a single pellet on the head of your opponent. It also makes it very easy to last hit. Very often what I do in lane is after I shoot the bots, I pretty much am ready to shoot it the moment I think the orb is going to come out, and then just focus on flicking towards it. So I'm like, I'm going to shoot here no matter what around this timing. You can do it maybe even a little bit earlier. And then you don't need to be entirely on top of the pellet, you just need to be in a general direction in order to last it. So it's very easy to last it with this character, but yeah, you want to be in close range in order to deal the maximum amount of damage with your left click. Okay, now let's get to the spells of Pocket. His probably most important spell is the Barrage. This is really what his entire kit is built around. It deals damage, it shoots 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4. It deals a little bit of damage, but that's the least important part about this spell. It actually gives you a damage amp, which means your damage is being amplified 7% for every single barrage that hit an opposing enemy. This doesn't stack if there's multiple enemies clumped up, so it's not like you're getting it times 4 for every hit if you're hitting 4 enemies with every single hit. But still, you're getting a 7% stack, and later on a 12% stack. This is generally also the spell that you want to max first. And this amplifies not only your left click damage, but also your spirit damage. So all of your spells deal extra damage if you hit opponents with this first. This is why you generally want to begin an engagement with this. And the next very important part about this is that it keeps your horizontal movement. So you can jump towards your opponent, then use the barrage, and that's what the spell is all about, because you can in the early game close the distance, as I just showed, with a kinetic dash or whatever you would call it otherwise, and then use the spell to keep the horizontal movement speed. And this is also why Majestic Leap is so strong on Pocket, because you can simply move around the map like this, right? You can jump and then you keep your horizontal movement speed whenever you want to. You will see very often them drop down as well. Use it like that, or do it like this, jump. These are kind of the 3 variations how you can use the Majestic Leap, and this is all thanks to the Barrage keeping the horizontal movement speed, so that's a very important part about that spell as well. Then the next spell is the Flying Cloak. This will help you get on top of your opponents sometimes. It very often is your escape tool as well. It deals damage around you. You can see it, the circle, this is... So it has quite a big AoE and it deals damage. And you can at any moment, as long as this bar is up, you can teleport towards it. So you can go in this direction and then teleport over here. So while you're escaping, very often it's good to throw the cloak one way, then try to run the other way. If the opponents are chasing you, you teleport. If they're not, you just don't teleport if they're chasing your cloak instead. So it's a very strong escape tool as well as a damaging tool. And obviously if you want to get on top of your opponents, you can also use it this way. Then the third spell is the Satchel. It is very much so like the phase shift from Puck. You're invulnerable while you're in the Satchel, and you will deal damage, AoE damage around you as you exit the Satchel. Very important to note is that you can throw the cloak, Satchel, and If you then press the teleport button, the explosion will go off at the destination of where you're teleporting to. So you can do it like this. If you're escaping, sorry, let me do that again. So you can either use it for burst on the location that you want to teleport to, or while you're escaping you can also left click before and then teleport. Important to note here is that the cloak duration is a little bit longer than the satchel, so if you use both of them at the same time, you should always throw your cloak first, because then you're invulnerable and you can still teleport to the other side. You can wait through the whole duration and then still teleport if you throw them approximately at the same time, because the satchel duration is not as long as the cloak duration. Then, your final spell, your ultimate ability is Affliction. It will deal damage over time in an AoE around yourself. So you need to get up close in order to use this, and it doesn't burst damage. In comparison to the rest of your kit, it doesn't deal burst damage, so you want to use this early on into the fights when your opponents are still very high on HP. It can't really kill targets, unless it's a shift that's bleeding down, but the spell itself, it cannot kill targets, so the opponents very often, when you use this, if you don't finish them, they're just gonna go back to base, but it will remove them from the fight, almost certainly, especially when you have it on, if you have it leveled up 3 times, because then it's 57 DPS over 18 seconds, so any non-tanky hero, it really takes out of the fight most of the time. So the way you generally want to use your spells is you go into a fight, you try to barrage, get the damage jump up, and then you can burst down your opponents. Whenever there's a team fight, you can use Affliction on multiple opponents, but honestly it's not necessary. Even just using this on a single opponent can be very, very, very powerful, because it just deals so much damage. So when you're in a duel, try to use it early on. That's so important, because it takes 18 seconds to get max value from it. So try to use this early on into the fights. The more opponents you hit, the better it is, but don't try to keep it for the 6-man ult. It's completely fine to use this on a single target, always. It is a relatively long cooldown, but it's a very, very strong spell, so please don't save it for the 6-minute Affliction every single time. Don't try to just wait for your Dynamo to find the biggest ult ever to run in there and ult yourself. And instead, use it early on into the fights. So this is my build. It's called Lambo Pack, and you can find it by simply browsing for it and searching for it. And I will go through it here. These are the early game items that you can buy in the laning stage. It starts off, I almost always start off by buying Enduring Spirit, because it's such a valuable item for him. It gives you a lot of bonus HP, as well as giving you 4 Spirit Power, which is the basic extra that every purple item gives you, as well as 8% Spirit Lifesteal, which is great for sustaining in lane. So a very valuable item on pocket. I would definitely recommend almost always getting this. Then Mystic Reach really helps you connect your first spell with your opponents in the early game, as well as the second and the third a little bit. It also gives you Spirit Resist, which Pocket really lacks, since he starts off with minus 15 Spirit Resist in the early game. Then Mystic Burst, that's an extra burst damage of 35. I tend to get the orange items before I get Mystic Burst, but that depends a little bit on lane. Headshot Booster is really easy to connect for the passive. For the plus 45 bonus damage, it really helps with trading with Pocket against heroes that really like to go in and get into close range. Close quarters is generally really good, and against heroes that don't, you are the one that tries to get close up. So this is also a very strong early game buy. Then, depending on if I want to get both of these, I will buy Hollow Point Ward or not. Sometimes I don't buy close quarters and instead go for Hollow Point Ward, but most of the time it's these two that I'm buying for the early game trading, and this really just scales very well into the later stages of the game as well. Then if I have a really good lane, I do go for Infuser. This item is just great for Pocket. It gives you plus 16 Spirit Power when you have it active, and it also gives you Spirit Lifesteal, 20% extra, which is just such a valuable item. The reason I don't get it, if I don't have a very good early game, is because Pocket really struggles for flex slots later on, and I do want to get Mystic Vulnerability as well as improved cooldown, so I'm only gonna go with these two, since those are the two I still want to upgrade. But honestly, you can still get it and then sell it if you don't happen to get an early flex slot, because it's just so good. And the item that I generally get last in lane is Sprint Boots. Now, some deviations here, if your lane is not going too hot, is you can go for extra regen. If your lane starts off a little bit poorly or you're having a hard time, going for extra regen is good. If you get an early kill, but you stay at very low HP, in a lot of situations you can also go for Healing Rite, where you can heal up. I generally favor extra regen if I can go for it over Healing Rite, but those are the early game scenarios where I would recommend those two, and then I would get them before Sprint Boots for sure. And you can swap them out later if you still want to get the Sprint Boost or just not get the Sprint Boost. Now the mid-game items. Here there are two ways Pocket generally is being played. You can either play him with Majestic Leap early or Warp Stone. Majestic Leap gives you better movement potential, being able to rotate around the map significantly faster as well as giving you a better outlook on the battlefield. This makes initiating fights as well as general decision making easier and will allow you to catch opponents that are out of position more often. Warpstone gives you better stats for dueling. If you really want to get in there and play aggressive, Warpstone might be the better buy for you. I believe the Majestic Leap route is simpler to play and execute, and when it comes down to it, it will be my recommendation for most of you, while the Warpstone play has better brawling and dueling potential and will win you some fights you wouldn't with a Majestic Leap. The choice here really is up to you. In terms of the rest of the items, I think Mystic Shot is the first more expensive item that you should buy. It's super valuable, it gives you spirit damage, which also procs the Mystic Vulnerability a little bit later on. Then you can go for Kinetic Dash. I would almost always go for Kinetic Dash if I go the Warpstone route. If I don't, I very often skip this. I also tend to, if I don't go for all three of those, I do tend to go for Kinetic Dash. Sometimes I go for Soul Shredder Bullets instead of Kinetic Dash. This is up to you. If you want to go for this early on, like if you want to go for both of these, you need to skip one of the orange ones. Then you get the Majestic Leap or the Warpstone item. Either one is fine. And then the next two spirit items that you get are Mystic Vulnerability, which, as I said before, it procs on your Mystic Shot. It also procs when you hit someone with your first spell, with any spell really. Then the improved cooldown reduction is key on Pocket. And then Spirit Lifesteal, I don't always get this. Here it really depends a little bit on the game. If I get an extra flex slot, I do get Soul Shredder Bullets quite early on as well, because the Spirit Amp as well as the Spirit Lifesteal is super big. Now, if I happen to go Infuser, or if I get the flex slot early up for Soul Shredder Bullets, I tend to not go for Spirit Lifesteal, because these items do give you Spirit Lifesteal, Soul Shredder Bullets during the fights, and Infuser whenever you have it active. And then depending on the match, you can go for Spirit Armor or Bullet Armor to become a little bit more tanky. Those are generally my first buys, and that's how you fill up your first slots efficiently. Then there are some situational items. Cold Front is a super valuable item for Pocket in particular because it gives you Spirit Resist and it damages opponents around you. With the way that Pocket is being played, you tend to go in and you can apply the debuff on your opponents almost always. So very reliably. The reason that I don't go for this most of the games is simply because we don't have the open slots for it. Pocket really struggles with the extra open slots, and there's so many items that he wants to buy and that are good on him that I know I'm not getting this in very many games. And there is the Silence Glyph, which is very strong in a lot of scenarios. You can get this if you keep getting swapped by a Lady Geist, or if you're struggling dueling a ninja. It is just generally a really strong item, and if you have an ability-based carry on your opponent's team that you're struggling with, this is a good buy for sure. Reactive Barrier you can get way earlier. This is also very situational, but for example, if you're in a Bebop lane and you keep getting hooked, this is a good buy for sure as well. Then if you keep getting ulted by the Mo and Krill, for example, this also gives you bullet shield health, spirit shield health. If you keep getting sleep darted, stuff like that, you can buy this and then skip these items for a little bit longer. Then here are the mid-game items, the 3k items that Pocket really wants to buy. These really expand upon the item slots that we have already filled up for extra efficiency. Improved Burst is really good at bursting down enemies. This is the first one that I would go for generally. Then if I have a really good game and I tend to acquire a lot of souls, instead of going for superior cooldown or any of these items, I actually go for Diviner's Kevlar. So even though this is in the late game column, you can go for this after Improved Burst already, because it also gives you cooldown reduction as well as Spirit Lifesteal. It's a really, really good item. It helps you get in there and be super tanky once you press your ultimate. And it also gives you plus 16 Spirit Power since it is a 6k item. It's just a really strong item on Pocket, and I get it almost every game. Then for the rest of the 3k items, I usually go for superior cooldown next. Cooldown reduction stacks multiplicatively, so it's not additively where you all of a sudden don't have any cooldowns anymore, but it still is so good for Pocket in general that you getting multiple of those tends to be very good. I do imbue the Flying Cloak usually, since the Flying Cloak has a longer cooldown than the Satchel. Very often I find myself not having it, as the Satchel comes on cooldown, and then I like having both, but you can also imbue the Satchel. It's definitely you use it on the second or the third spell. You can try it on both and see whichever you like more. Then Improved Reach I use on my ultimate almost always. You can also use it on your Barrage, but the ultimate, especially in late game, is so impactful, and barely getting someone is huge. Then Point Blank I tend to get a little bit earlier if I am struggling with killing some tanky heroes. There's also some extra tricks that I will tell you later on against tanky heroes. Enduring speed I get whenever I have money for it later on into the game. There is no high priority, it's just nice to have, nice to upgrade the sprint boots. But it's not a necessity. And then the late game, the Diviner's Cavalier, I tend to get honestly in the mid game. And then later on, you want to improve your armor if you need it. Phantom Strike can be really good at hunting down the Archer or the Sniper, Vindicta or Great Talon, I think they're called. It is very difficult for you to get on top of them otherwise. So Phantom Strike is really good against them, and it's just good at dueling or chasing single targets either way. Spiritual Overflow is probably the best weapon item for him later on. Gives you extra spirit power if you shoot the opponents, and it also just increases your fire rate, which Pocket really likes. Escalating exposure you can get later on. Leech if you're struggling with staying alive. The improved armors, as I said before. Curse if you're struggling against a single opponent, let's say the ninja again, where you didn't want to go for Silence Glyph earlier. Curse in late game. It's just really good at singling out targets. Boundless Spirit I honestly almost never get, but it's super expensive, so if you're super rich, you might as well get it. It adds a lot of DPS to your spells. Then get, if necessary, Soul Rebirth. I tend to get against teams that have so much silences and other stuff that can kill me, where I'm not sure that I can stay alive. If you find yourself dying too often in late game, just get this. Pocket is very good after coming back to life with this item to still get out of the fight. Especially if you have Majestic Leap, because it's most of the time going to come off cooldown. Also, all of your spells are going to be coming off cooldown, so very often you can escape after the Soul Rebirth goes off. Ethereal Shift against opponents that can silence you, either if they buy Silence Glyph or if they have any spells that can silence you. Ethereal Shift is really, really strong. Unstoppable is really good also if they have a lot of silences, but I personally tend to go over Soul Rebirth. I tend to go for Soul Rebirth over Unstoppable very often. And Ethereal Shift is also another option against these silences. Then for the items that you can sometimes get, where you can deviate depending on the game. Decay is, I think, an important one if you're struggling against heroes like Abrams or Kelvin. Usually it's not your job to deal with the tanky heroes, but if no one else does, this is probably the best item to go for in the early mid game, where it does bleed based on their HP, which is cool, as well as it reduces their healing, especially now since we are having a Kelvin meta, which can still change from day to day. This is a very good item against him. Then most of the other items that you can decide depending on the game are over here in the Vitality section. Healbane is also a good item against these heroes that you can go for. The Enchanter's Barrier can be super nice for Pocket. The Spirit Shield itself can save him since he doesn't have good Spirit Resist, but it's more about the extra Spirit Power that you gain plus the cooldown reduction. It's actually a super good item. Just base health, Spirit Power, and cooldown reduction. As long as the Spirit Shield stays alive, it can be super strong. So that's a very nice item to go for. I also have started to use Divine Barrier sometimes whenever I'm owning in a game. Instead of going for the Spirit Armor or Bullet Armor, I'm going for the Divine Barrier. And you can activate it. It makes you quicker. It's good for dueling. It gives you extra ability range and gives you some stuff the Bullet Armor and the Spirit Armor don't do. So in games where I'm owning, sometimes I prefer this over the Bullet Armor and the Spirit Armor in order to snowball a little harder. Another item that you can go for is Veilwalker. That's good in some scenarios. In the mid-game, Metal Skin, if you're struggling specifically against a haze that is ulting you, combined with silencer bullets. Metal Skin is kind of the counter to that. And then you can even sometimes go for something like an inhibitor. I personally wouldn't do it, but I had a game, for example, where Wraith was hard carrying, and I went for it just in order to apply the damage penalty to that single person. In the same sense, in many games, also Suppressor can be very good for these types of situations where you apply the fire rate slow. Against these left-click heroes can be very, very strong. But most of the time you can just stick to the general build and you'll be good. Alright, so we're gonna showcase a little bit of the laning mechanics in this replay. One thing that you should always do is abuse line of sight. In the early game, stand behind the natural cover that the map gives you. And then you can poke from it and shoot every once in a while. Since you have shotgun bullets, you don't have a high fire rate. You can poke out, shoot once at your opponent or at the bots and come back. Let's just ignore this. It's still in alpha, this game. So yeah, here we managed to last hit one. Bebop is very strong close range. We didn't know yet what he skilled. Very often they skill hook. Sometimes I can also skill the bomb first. Whenever I see my opponent is trying to go for last hits like right now, the advantage I have... Whoops. Didn't mean to go over there. The advantage that you have by last hitting creeps is that you then can try to punish your opponent, or by auto-attacking the creeps is that you can now try to punish your opponent for shooting the creeps, and then the moment he tries to come forward and shoot, I went for the barrage, and the moment you have the damage amp, you can be super aggressive, like especially if you have a +4 damage amp, even with +3, you outtrade anyone in the early game. So the moment you have it, try to get as many shots in on your opponent as possible, and just like that I got a kill. Usually it will not be this easy. This is honestly the first replay that I clicked on, because my scoreline was very good, so I figured maybe the laning stage was as well. But yeah, make sure to use this as natural cover. Punish your opponent for overextending. Try to get into close range with most of the characters. This also depends a little bit on who you're up against. If I'm laning against the Kelvin, for example, you need the cloak, or you need to hold long range at first, because the Arctic Beam will generally just kill you. You can't shoot, it slows you down, you have minus 15% spirit resist. So against Kelvin sometimes I just stay long range, and sometimes I even take Flying Cloak first to cloak out when he runs at me with the Arctic Beam. Usually I still take it second, but you can't use this offensively, and you will learn these type of mechanics, who you can outtrade in close range, who you can't outtrade in close range, etc. You can also go for parries, obviously. A lot of people right now are just trying to power up punch, so if you go forward and parry, you have a free kill. But it's generally all about using the barrage. You use the barrage. This also goes through walls, so if, for example, my opponent is standing behind this right here, you can put it against the wall, and it still connects even if he stands behind it. Or if he stands behind any cover, you can go to the side. Very often what happens while you're using the barrage is, so let's say he's standing behind this, right? I use the barrage on this, the first two, and then you kind of anticipate where he's moving towards. Generally, they're going to dash to the side, either towards the next cover, so I would go and anticipate with the third or the fourth hit over here or over here. The most frequent usage will be if the opponent stands right here, the first couple of barrages go here and then to the right or to the left. Okay, now I went into a bot match real quick because I haven't noted down in which replay what happens, because I want to show a couple of mechanics that are important for the laning stage real quick. So usually I will buy Enduring Spirit first. Let's say you're forced to go back to base, right? You're forced to go back to base for whatever reason, or you die. You can boost forward, and with the boost, or even without the boost, you have more momentum than you usually have in the early game. So as you jump off, you can barrage forward and kill exposed opponents. This is one way to get on top of opponents, and you can get back really easily into the games that way. Because very often your opponent kills you and they will not expect you to be back quick enough. And you can get a very cheap kill, just like that. What you can also oftentimes do is go to a neighboring lane and then gank this way, right? The boost is active. You come in here, you help them here. You come in and barrage. Very often this is also how you go forward, right? You go in with a dash jump. You go in with a dash jump, you go gank another lane. Pocket is generally quite good at ganking, and then you're just back at your own lane. So this is another thing that you can do either after you die or after you go back to base. When you're low HP, you just boost back home real quick. Use the momentum of your barrage combined with the zipline. So even just this, if you zipline like that, you can get on top of opponents, because that's faster than most heroes will be, especially if they used up all of their stamina already. Alright, one more thing that I want to show real quick, which is very useful into the game later on, is the way you apply your ult safely. So very often you're jumping like this, you ult in the middle of 4 opponents, and then you're like, oh shit, let me satchel, I did some extra damage, and then I die, right? Because I used up my jump to get in, and maybe even afterwards, if I'm in there, I try to do this, I can't get out anymore. They know exactly where I'm going, right? They can follow this. So the safe way to do it is to throw the cloak before you engage. So you jump in, you go down here, you use this, and then you teleport out, and then you try to shoot them from afar. This is a safe way to ult. This is generally very useful. You can also try to throw the cloak behind them, cut them off if you're very confident. But this will keep you safe already before you use Diviner's Cavalier, or before you buy Diviner's Cavalier. when you want to ult against multiple opponents. This is a very useful tech. Alright, since this video is already quite long, I'm not gonna analyze a mid and late game here in this video. I might make an extra one if there's any interest in it. But what I'm gonna do instead is I leave you with a match ID that you can put in-game, and then you can watch a replay in which I dealt 90k damage, where you can see a lot of the tech that I talked about applied during the game. I hope you guys all enjoyed this. If you have any questions, make sure to leave it in the comments below. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe. This is my first Deadlock video. I might ask some other pro players of different characters to also make similar guides. So if you're interested in different heroes, let me know which ones. Thank you for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.